comes to mind.
I think another element of that fact that we started as teenagers in England, and so most of the kids that were going to that school, we all had a double bond because we were in a foreign country, we were Americans, we knew. So, you know, you even clung to each other a little more. And then when Gerry and Dan and I's band became as popular and we were now back on the road, having come from military families, we moved a lot, so we were kind of prepared for at least the transitory aspect of our coming lives. But that bond, that shared bond of being in a foreign country in those days and going to school together, it transferred pretty well, I think, to this business of ours. And it has been up and down, you know, as with any band after 40 years, or anybody, any couple or anybody, 40 years, there's going to be a lot of experiences, transitions, and things that have occurred. And some are tougher than others, but I think as overall, we've had a pretty good ability to ward off the bad times and get through them. And it's really great right now for me to look at the band today and see that we're playing as strong as ever. And fortunately, knock on wood, we've all got our health to the degree that we can keep this pace up and keep producing music. We have a new CD out right now, and for me, that's quite an accomplishment in and of itself when you consider the obstacles and the historical pattern that can happen. You know, that we're still here and can really take a lot of joy out of playing every night. You know, tonight's going to be another example. I'm looking forward to tonight.
You're a total survivor, and when you think about Backpages, the record that you're alluding to, which is filled with covers of great songs, and it's a great follow-up when you think of that journey you had as this young men living abroad with your families who were, you know, defending our country, I guess you would say, overseas. Did that have some influence in the song structure that we get on Backpages, or is that more something that you guys put together as adults, saying, man, these are my favorite songs now? I mean, where are those songs in the lineage of your life, I guess?
Well, certainly they were kind of part of the DNA of our early teen years, and picking apart songs and familiarizing ourselves with the songwriting craft, if you will. They're some of the great writers of our time. We really keyed in on the writers primarily to begin with. Paul Simon, Bob Dylan, Jimmy Webb, Joni Mitchell, Brian Wilson. I mean, the list is just so huge, and their catalogs of songs are just so big. So it's really a drop in the bucket that we just happened to pick songs like "America" by by Simon & Garfunkel. You know, Backpages is a title just based on the song My Backpages, which was one of so many Bob Dylan songs that were on our list. It goes on and on. I think that those were just surfaced. There was no game plan to put together a series of songs that clung together in some way. They just were the ones that came off the top of our head initially, and we didn't want to overthink it and start. We did decide not to do one song over another for various reasons. If our vocal the timbre of our voices or something wasn't gonna work in that song, but basically there were songs that we loved, and I think I said before that that's what really got us interested in writing ourselves, was those great songs and the composers themselves. Yeah, wouldn't it be great to be able to write something anywhere near those type of songs? And of course we scratched our own career out of these many decades, and we're proud of our own work. But it was nice to revisit these, and in the studio it was like going back in time a little bit, and we're not really reinterpreting them, but putting our own spin on some of those, and our own vocal timbre really is what we lend to them, our own blend and our own interpretation of the lyric.
Yeah, your own flair, really. I know what you mean by that. And that's sort of another question. I was wondering, when you think about those tunes, was part of it a challenge? Like, I want to pick songs that are maybe going to be a challenge for us to do in our way. Or was the other side of it, we can nail this one. We should choose ones we shine on.
You know, actually both of those things occurred, and we were right, and on occasion we were wrong. There were certain ones that we loved, and we just thought this would be great to do, and how great for the live show. And we ended up listening, and I don't like to name which ones, because certain, you know, it's not right. It was our fault if it didn't come together. But we might have ended up with just kind of a bad cover version of what was the existing track. But we did end up with this list of writers. almost, I mean, there's 2 or 3 more current tunes, but the list of writers, you could almost line up each one of those composers, Joni Mitchell or Paul Simon, each one of their greatest hits, and you could turn the knob from track 1 to track 2, and we could almost do another album of whatever the second song was on their greatest hits, because the writers turned out to be people of such depth that, frankly, one of the limitations was, well, we don't want to do more than one Jimmy Webb song or one Paul Simon. So, but each one of them had such a list of fantastic work to pick from that it's a testament to their.
We kind of tried not to pick their biggest hits, it'd be like doing Beatles songs and things like that. That's always been kind of like sacred ground. We've actually done Beatles songs in our set and so on, but we made a few decisions not to go straight for the number 1 song from each of these artists. The James Taylor song.
That's what I was going to mention. Actually, it was the James.
Fire and Rain, Yesterday, Good Vibrations.
Yeah. I think we might have it tough. Let's give Good Vibrations a shot next album.
I certainly did think that, though, with Fire and Rain. I was wondering why it was something in the way she made. So some of these songs were band favorites, but in other cases it was a challenge. When you talk about possibly just dialing in that second tune from each of these bands' albums, it does. When you think about this album, and after listening to it at home, I wonder, is there going to be like a Back Pages 2 or another attempt at?
Yeah, I hope so. We'd already, obviously there were far more on the list than we could make on one album. So that was the start of the follow-up list. But also, we had such a great time once we started the process that it was really, first of all, very quick. We used players in Nashville that we hadn't really worked with before. Fred Mullen, who produced it, is an old dear friend. It was a very smooth project, so we had a great time. And hopefully, with the success that we've had, it will allow us down the road to maybe do this again. It's just interesting that certain artists have touched on cover songs, and I can think of many. James Taylor has the knack of taking some of the greatest tunes by other artists, making them his own, without ever calling into question his own ability as a songwriter. I think at this point, after 41 years, we were entitled to do that ourselves,
You did a really cool job of it. I want to twist it around from the record and the stuff that you guys were covering to someone who sort of covered you, reinterpreted it. And I'm just curious, I've never heard since he passed away much about this. Michael Jackson, he did this kind of revamped version of A Horse with No Name, and I guess I should start with you since that's more of your jam. Did you have any kind of contact with him? How did you come to be aware of that?
We didn't. It was about 4 or 5 years before he passed away that we became aware that he had recorded this version of Horse with No Name called Place with No Name. And it was essentially the Horse with No Name track and melody with new lyrics that he had written. But it was kind of, we could never really get to the bottom of where, when, how that happened. It suddenly surfaced. We became aware of it and thought it was a novelty thing. It was pretty interesting, actually, and it didn't resurface, really. We thought, well, that went away. It didn't come out on another album. And, of course, when he passed away, everything started coming out of the vaults, and that one did show itself. And it's kind of eerie because the lyric almost speaks a little bit about going to a place with no name and going away, maybe reading too much into it in the advent of the tragedy of his death, which was a shock to everybody, of course. And other than that, we shared the stage with him once, which was at the RFK Stadium after 9/11. It was a big, huge event for the Pentagon bombing. And he played that, he closed that one. But that's the only time we'd ever been shared the stage at anything with him. I certainly was in the studio with him. We weren't asked to do anything on that. And but I really am proud, and I think Gerry and I both like the song Place with No Name. We hope it surfaces one day.
Yeah, exactly right. It's only like a little clip. It's like an extra.
Yeah, that was kind of some weird thing.
Like a tease.
It was, and those are those kind of things that we have no control over. They're leaked or whatever, and they're just a sensationalist moment, and then they fade into the background. So it's a shame that the general public hasn't heard the whole track, and because it is a story. His lyric is similar to Horse with No Name in that sense, but it's a story of this mythical place that he goes to called. Anyway, it's hard to explain. You'd have to hear it.
It's very flattering that he would do that, dude. I mean, that says a lot.
It was. We've got this odd connection with the Jackson family in that Janet Jackson used elements of Ventura Highway in one of her songs called Someone to Call My Lover. And before that, the song, Gerry, what's the other song that Janet...
Let's Wait a While.
Which was essentially a Daisy Jane melody. So it's very odd. We don't know how that happened. We might have...
Our influence stretches far and wide. Just a FYI on these kind of things and how big the reach of all of this is. I had a call the day he passed away from a guy on my cell phone. Never had a call before and he said, "Hello, it's Nigel from..."
Nigel.
Yeah, it was an English guy. It wasn't Nigel, but that's our default English name. From the National Enquirer. And I'd just like to know, we've heard this song, would like to get a comment from you on Michael's song, Place with No Name, which he recorded the night before he died. and I stopped and I thought, well, first of all, I can't, there's no comment or anything, but it had already morphed into, now this song was recorded the night before. And we'd heard it years before.
Never recorded.
Yeah, and it was like all of a sudden it had become the last thing. So that's how a story spreads. You know.
Well, it's good to get the clarification of it.
I think we've just come up with our next covers album. We're doing all Jackson songs.
I think it would be a very novel approach. Look, I could talk to you guys all night. I know you got a show to do. I really do appreciate you taking a few minutes to kick back with me and just sort of explore both your local connections, your new record, some of this other stuff. It has meant a lot to me. I've been chasing you around for a few years trying to do this, so thanks for finally doing it.
Thank you, and we love NPR, so thanks for having us.
You're welcome, Dewey. Gerry, seriously, bro, appreciate it.
We're big fans. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Right on, man.